Hey everyone, welcome to SA Daily Insight, the home of fearless storytelling and bold conversations about what's really happening in South Africa. I'm Peter, and today we're diving into a story that, if you've been following the news, is shaking the very foundations of politics, business, and power in our country. This isn't just about one scandal or one person. This is about the intersection of wealth, influence, and alleged criminal activity, the kind that leaves ordinary South Africans staring at the headlines wondering how this could even happen. And today we're connecting the dots between some of the biggest names in the news: Brown Mogotsi, Hangwani Maumela, and yes, even the office of the president. Now, let's start with the man who's been at the center of a storm for months, a man whose name has become synonymous with controversy and alleged corruption in healthcare tenders: Hangwani Maumela. You may have seen him in the headlines before, associated with Tembisa Hospital, a place where, according to investigators, hundreds of millions of rands were allegedly siphoned off through a complex web of shell companies and fraudulent contracts. And when I say hundreds of millions, I'm not exaggerating. We're talking close to 2 billion rand allegedly extracted from a hospital system that is meant to serve ordinary South Africans, people who rely on public health care for their survival. Now, Hangwani isn't just any businessman. He's been described by sources as the alleged kingpin of this massive syndicate, and it's not just the scale of the money that shocks people. It's the audacity, the sheer brazenness. Hangwani's network reportedly operated through dozens of shell companies, each securing one or two contracts at a time, all funneling wealth away from the hospital and into private hands. And some of those shell companies? They were allegedly connected to Matlala, another figure whose name keeps appearing in investigations of public tender corruption. And here's where it starts to get even more interesting. Hangwani, as some of you may know, is a nephew of President Cyril Ramaphosa. Yes, by a previous marriage. Now I know what many of you are thinking. A nephew by a previous marriage? That's barely a connection. And sure, on paper it might not seem significant. But here's the thing. Connections in South Africa, especially when it comes to business and politics, are never just about bloodlines. They're about networks, access, influence, and the kind of doors that open when you move in the right circles. And Hangwani, according to reporting from investigative journalist Jeff Wicks, has been moving in exactly those kinds of circles. But before we get too deep into the networks, let's pause for a moment to take in the scale of this lifestyle. 4 of Hangwani's luxury Lamborghinis were seized on Thursday as part of investigations into his alleged activities. Let that sink in for a second. 4 Lamborghinis. Each one of them a multi-million-rand machine, each one a symbol of wealth and excess. And while ordinary South Africans are struggling to make ends meet, this is the world that exists behind closed doors, funded, allegedly, by the very contracts meant to improve public health care. Now let's bring Brown Mogotsi into the picture. Mogotsi is widely described as an ANC fixer, a man whose influence stretches into the highest levels of politics. He is connected to figures such as Senzo Mchunu and, again, Matlala. And according to Jeff Wicks's reporting, there is a crystal-clear connection between Mogotsi and Hangwani. What does that mean in practice? Well, it means that when Hangwani allegedly wanted to expand his tentacles into new tenders, he had someone at his disposal, someone with the to influence processes and intervene where needed, to make sure things went his way. One of the most dramatic examples of this came with the Northwest Province catering tender. This was not a small contract. We're talking about a 4-year deal covering 11 major health facilities, a deal worth over R1 billion. Now imagine the level of influence required to intervene in a tender of that size. According to reports, Mogotsi did exactly that. He filed an interdict through either his foundation or his son's foundation to stop the award of the tender to the original winning bidder, essentially trying to reroute the contract in favor of a company connected to Hangwani's syndicate. That company? Aloo Construction and Supply, a shell company that was part of Hangwani's sprawling network, one of the dozens of entities allegedly used to fleece Tembisa Hospital. The audacity here is breathtaking. Think about it. a system designed to provide food and services to public health facilities, critical for the health of countless South Africans, allegedly manipulated through shell companies and interdicts to divert wealth to private individuals. And when you read the reports, it's not just a single incident. This was a repeated pattern. Aloo Construction went on to submit another provincial catering tender later that year, again allegedly using fraudulent methods like fake BEE certificates to try and secure yet another multi-million-rand contract. Now, if you're following this closely, you might be thinking, wait, how does all this connect to politics at the highest level? Well, that's where it gets even more layered. Hangwani's connections, through Mogotsi and his networks, have positioned him within spheres of influence that reach the upper echelons of power. And yes, while President Ramaphosa has publicly stated that he does not personally know Hangwani, the proximity of these networks to the president's office cannot be ignored. The very fact that Hangwani is related by a previous marriage, even if distant, means that doors are more accessible, networks are tighter, and influence flows more freely. This is why many experts and commentators are now calling for transparency and accountability at the highest levels, particularly the Madlanga Commission. The commission was set up to investigate high-level political interference, corruption, and mismanagement, and the lines connecting Hangwani, Mogotsi, and the president's network raise serious questions about accountability. If we are to understand the scale of corruption and ensure that justice is done, these questions cannot be left unanswered. Let's take a step back and consider the human impact. Every rand allegedly siphoned from Tembisa Hospital represents services not delivered, patients not properly cared for, lives affected. We're talking about people waiting in long queues, nurses doing more with less, families struggling to access basic health care. And behind that, the luxury Lamborghinis, the multi-million-rand mansions, the kind of wealth that ordinary South Africans can only dream of. It's a stark, almost cinematic contrast, the reality on the ground versus the reality behind closed doors. And yet, it's not just about wealth, it's about the audacity and brazenness of how these operations were allegedly conducted. We see shell companies created and recycled, interdicts filed to manipulate tender processes, multiple tenders targeted across provinces, and networks moving seamlessly across business and politics. It's almost as if the system itself was being tested, and according to these reports, pushed to its limits. Now, you might ask, why does this matter for us as citizens watching from the outside? Because this is a story that affects the very fabric of governance in South Africa. When the lines between political power and alleged criminal activity blur, it's ordinary people who bear the brunt. Hospitals are underfunded, healthcare is compromised, and trust in public institutions erodes. And that erosion of trust isn't abstract, it's tangible. It affects the life expectancy, the quality of care, and the hope that South Africans have in a government that is meant to serve them. So, let's circle back to the central figures here. Brown Mogotsi, the fixer, the influencer, the man with ties to powerful political figures and alleged access to tenders worth billions. Hangwani Maumela, the businessman accused of orchestrating an elaborate network of shell companies to extract wealth from public institutions, allegedly leveraging familial and political connections to expand his influence. And the President, Cyril Ramaphosa, who, while stating he doesn't know Hangwani personally, finds himself indirectly connected through familial ties and the broader networks in which these alleged deals occurred. And the pattern we're seeing is not a one-off. It's a repeated playbook. Shell companies created to extract money, tenders manipulated, interdicts filed, influential networks leveraged, all while wealth accumulates at the top and the public loses out. It's systemic, it's audacious, and it's exactly the kind of corruption the Madlanga Commission was created to investigate. What makes this story particularly explosive, and what makes it resonate so deeply, is the visibility of it all. We're not talking about obscure shell games in hidden corners. These are multi-million-rand tenders, high-profile names, and investigations that have already resulted in asset seizures and public scrutiny. We've seen the Lamborghinis seized, we've seen shell companies exposed, and we've seen the ripple effects across provinces as these tenders and interdicts play out. And it's all connected. forming a web that ordinary South Africans can now trace through investigative reporting, court filings, and media coverage. But here's the thing. While the facts themselves are staggering, the human drama, the questions of accountability, and the potential for justice are what makes this story truly compelling. Because at the end of the day, it's about the choices of a few powerful individuals and how those choices ripple out to affect the lives of millions. And it's also about whether our institutions, from law enforcement to the judiciary, have the will and capacity to hold those individuals to account. As we continue to follow this story, one thing becomes clear. The need for transparency, accountability, and rigorous investigation is not optional. It is essential. The networks of influence, the repeated use of shell companies, the manipulation of tenders, these are not minor infractions. These are actions that, if proven, represent a fundamental breach of public trust and a systemic threat to good governance. And that is why it's critical that voices like Jeff Wicks and institutions like the SIU and the Madlanga Commission continue to pursue these cases relentlessly. So, South Africa, as you watch this unfold, remember this. The story of Hangwani and Brown Mogotsi is more than a scandal about money or tenders. It's a mirror reflecting the state of power and accountability in our country. It's a test of our institutions, our journalism, and ultimately, our collective commitment to justice. And whether you are a politician, a business person, or an ordinary South African, this story has implications for all of us. I'll leave you with this thought. Power, wealth, and influence can build empires, but they can also expose fragility. And when those empires are built on alleged corruption at the expense of ordinary citizens, they eventually collapse under scrutiny. This is why investigative journalism, public vigilance, and strong institutions are so crucial in a democracy like ours. That's it for today's Deep Dive, South Africa. Thank you for sticking with me through this intricate story, connecting the dots between Hangwani Maumela, Brown Mogotsi, and the networks that are shaping our country behind the scenes. Stay informed, stay critical, and remember that the news isn't just what happens, it's about understanding why it happens and who it affects. I'm Peter, and you're watching SA Daily Insight. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe, because stories like these aren't just headlines, they are the pulse of our nation. And I'll see you in the next one.